The session 4 will now commence. First, Mr. Ito Kunio, Chair of the TCFD Consortium, will give a keynote speech.
As the chair of the TCFD Consortium, which is a co-host, I'd like to express my deep gratitude to all for being able to convene today the 6th Summit with the new name of GGX Finance Summit. Since the previous GGX TCFD Summit held in 2023, the activities of TCFD have come to an end. And IFRS Foundation took on the task of monitoring the status of climate-related disclosure. Although the TCFD organization is no longer active, the IFRS sustainability disclosure standard draw upon the TCFD framework, and the TCFD as a common language for disclosure remains to be important. In Japan as well, the SSBJ exposure draft has been released following the IFRS sustainability disclosure standards in its alignment with the approach taken by TCFD. Thus, TCFD and TCFD Consortium have reached a major turning point. However, the importance of climate-related disclosure is not diminished. On the contrary, we believe that its importance will further increase towards the realization of GX, green transformation, announced by the Japanese government. In fact, the Japanese companies show a high degree of interest in climate-related disclosure. When the TCFD completed the activities in November 2023, the number of supporting institutions was 1,488, accounting for 30% of the world's supporter, the largest in the world. The TCFD Consortium has been undertaking activities with the participation of 870 organizations, which is more than half of the participating organizations. These efforts in Japan have been called Japan Success by the TCFD Secretariat from the beginning and have contributed to climate-related disclosure becoming mainstream. Today, the TCFD Consortium has held a series of discussions involving with both companies undertaking disclosure based upon TCFD recommendations, as well as investors utilizing such information, and has formulated and revised the TCFD guidance and green investment guidance. Recently, the TCFD Consortium has held a series of discussions on transition plan, for which there is a worldwide growing trend for the formulation and disclosure. As a culmination of these discussions, in August of this year, the TCFD Consortium published the Transition Plan Guidebook, which can be used as a reference when Japanese companies formulate transition plans. From these examples, it can be said that the TCFD Consortium provides a valuable forum where entities who disclose climate-related information and those who use such information can come together to discuss various related topics of common interest. The TCFD Consortium is continuing discussion on how Japanese companies supporting TCFD should address pending issues in light of rapidly evolving global trends. As for the future, the GX Acceleration Agency, GX Session4, which was launched in July of this year, will also be involved in the operation of the consortium. Taking this opportunity, in addition to the existing activities, the TCFD Consortium will discuss further development of its activities, including those that are more closely related to finance. This year's summit will discuss what is needed to further promote transition finance. In order to realize GX, a total of 150 trillion yen, or about $1 trillion in public and in private investments is required. And transition finance for highly emission industries is essential for decarbonization of the real economy. I hope that the government, industry, and finance leaders will actively discuss these issues. I also hope that through today's discussion, companies will enhance their climate-related disclosures, and financial institutions appropriately evaluate them, which pave way for necessary funds to address climate changes to be provided. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will move on to the panel discussion 4, Formulating Transition Plans. The moderator of this session is Mr. Yamaga Teppei, Managing Director of Sustainability Planning Department, Mizuho Financial Group, Inc. Now, I'd like to ask Mr. Yamaga to moderate the session. Mr. Yamaga, please.
Thank you for introduction. So, hello everyone. I'm Teppei Yamaga from the Sustainability Planning Department of the Mizuho Financial Group. I'm currently responsible for planning and disclosure of the Mizuho Financial Group's sustainability strategy, policy engagement, and collaboration with global initiatives. I also serve as the chair of the PKF Japan Coalition, a partnership for carbon accounting financials. And you may know me as a promoter of the avoided emissions intervention accounting. So thank you for having me as a moderator of this panel discussion in session 4. And I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the committee and all the people involved in the event. The main topic of this panel discussion is the transition plan, which is now the focus of the global sustainability stakeholders. So I'm much honored to moderate this great panel discussion. So as you know, the environment surrounding climate-related disclosures has changed dramatically with the IFRS, ISSP standards released last year. Companies are increasingly expected to make greater efforts to disclose more information, such as a transition plan, in addition to the Scope 3 emissions and more sector-specific requirements. In 2021, TCFD defined a transition plan as an aspect of an organization's overall business strategy that lays out a set of the targets and actions supporting its transition toward a low-carbon economy, including actions such as reducing its GHG emission. A similar definition is included in various other initiatives, IFRS S2, Climate-Related Disclosure, and TPT, Transition Plan Task Force. So as climate-related disclosures grows exponentially, it becomes more important to develop the transition plans, especially in the hard-to-abate sector. This is because the transition plan organically combines the various climate-related disclosures within dynamic business strategies and corporate story to ensure more constructive and meaningful engagement between companies and investors. Also, efforts towards decarbonization based on the transition plan will require a huge amount of funds, and not only in the public sector, but also private financial institutions are expected to actively provide funds. So from the perspective of the financial institutions, the transition plan that provides detailed future information on transition strategy towards net zero is crucial for promoting transition finance. So today, it's a pleasure to welcome our distinguished panelists to this discussion. So let me introduce panelists. So from your right side, so Mr. Shunsuke Oshida, the Managing Director, Head of the Credit Research Japan, Manulife Investment Management, and Ms. Noriko Ogawa, Vice President, ESG Promotion Department, Japan Airlines. And the last, Mr. Sean Kidney, CEO, the Climate Bonds Initiative. So thank you all for making your service available for this session. So first, let's start with a short introduction from each of the panelists. Can you touch upon your background and how you are viewing discussions on climate-related disclosures overall? This question is not limited to transition plans. So Oshida-san, please.
Thank you for the introduction, Yamaga-san. I'm very proud of and grateful to be given this valuable opportunity. I'd like to express my gratitude to everyone involved. My name is Shunsuke Oshida, and I'm a head of the credit research at Manulife Investment Japan. The Manulife investment is the investment arm under the Manulife group that headquarters in Toronto, and are focusing on the life insurance company. And Manulife Investment Management Japan has been actually working on ESG integration since 2017. And I hope that our view as a bond investor will be helpful for today's audience. And I would like to make a few comments about the relationship between the Japanese bond market and climate change. The Japanese bond market is has a certain size with a value around 80 trillion yen. Within this, the bond issued by the companies in sector generally referred as hard-to-abate industry, such as the electric utilities, gas utilities, the automobiles, steel, chemicals, and air and marine transportation accounts for around 30% of the market. Therefore, the Japanese investors, it is difficult for Japanese investors to ignore or divest their bonds issued by such the sectors. Therefore, we have the one-on-one ESG engagement with issuers. And in Japan, there is a wonderful platform for dealing with climate change called the TCFD Consortium. So we have been participating since its establishment in 2019. The TCFD Consortium holds a roundtable several times a year, where issuers and investors have a discussion on the general ESG disclosure and a transition plan in a small group. We have been very active in participating in those events, attending the 16 out of 18 roundtables so far. I have also attended roundtable with the team from the JAL, who is also on the panel today. And now, here is our view on the progress in climate change disclosure. Overall, I have the impression that there has been a lot of improvement. However, I also feel the gap in quality of the disclosure between the companies that are taking a proactive approach, such as JAR, and those not, is expanding. I often hear that there are biased discussions and many issues within the issuer when it comes to making climate-related disclosures. But I feel that the more proactive a company is in its dialogue with investors, the better the contents of its disclosure. That's from us.
Thank you, Yoshida-san. So next, Oka-san, please.
Thank you, Yamaga-san. My name is Noriko Ogawa from Japan Airlines. It is such a privilege for me today to talk to you. I joined the company, starting my career working at the Narita Airport as a ground staff on international flights. After experiencing several posts, I joined the world of sustainability in 2019. JAL started facing with sustainability disclosure, such as TCFD, since 2018. That is a time when the pressure of the decarbonization to the aviation sector increased, such as flight shame, mainly in Europe, as you may recall. We had an opportunity to make the scenario analysis and organized and examined the risk and opportunity in accordance with the TCFD classification through the program by the Ministry of Environment. I would say at that time, JAL was taking a relatively passive stance on such a disclosure and did not have that many opportunity to communicate with investors on this topic. In June 2020, the chairman at that time announced net zero emission by 2050 at the general shareholders meeting. And in May 2021, the roadmap, how we achieve the net zero emission by 2050 were released when the current midterm management plan was announced. Could you show the slide, please? Yes, this is our roadmap. So we started disclosure in accordance with the TCFD in July of the same year, and also initiatives to advocate the need of SAF to the society, such as the government or fuel producers, and so on, were initiated. In October, a joint report with ANA, another Japanese airline, called Toward Net Zero CO2 Emission from Air Transport in 2050, in order to expand awareness and promote understanding of SAF as issued. And in March 2022, the first transition bond, which supports the steadily purchasing state-of-the-art equipment, was issued. Our disclosure, in accordance with TCFD, have been revised every year in 2022, 2023, and 2024. I think we are learning every time we revise the scenario. The disclosure of information in accordance with the TCFD is very time-consuming and difficult for us, but it is beneficial for us. It provides an opportunity for companies to discuss their future ideal state internally, and also it provides a good opportunity for them to show their approach to society. Such a trend by these companies is also a trigger for whole society to think about how to respond to climate change, which is ideal. Thank you.
Thank you, Oga-san. And I'm happy to see Sean on the screen, not here. Could you briefly introduce you and explain your background or the initiative on the climate-related disclosures, please?
Sure. And hi from Paris, everyone, where I'm at the OECD Green Finance Summit, including speaking with Hideki Takada from the GGX Acceleration Agency on a panel together in a little while. My apologies for not being able to be there in this great event, and it's fantastic that the GGX Finance Summit continues to be hosted as a way of driving the change. You know, I just want to say also how cool it is to be on this panel with Ogawa-san, because the JAL transition work is an example of exactly what we need to see industry doing across our economy, across the world. I might have some discussions, arguments about what we can do and how to do more in that area and so on, but the point is JL is working to change, and in the context of the challenges we face, not just the government's commitment to emissions reductions in 2030 and 2050, but the global imperative to get emissions down to avoid catastrophic impacts in our society, it is very heartening for me to hear Ogawa-san's story and the work that JL is doing as an example of what forward-thinking, proactive, as Oshida-san says, industries in Japan are doing and need to be doing. Of course, we've got to do a lot more. The tricky part of all of this is the transition is very hard. It is not easy to get JL to net zero. I mean, it is an airline. To get JL to net zero by 2050 is a very big and challenging job that applies to all the industries that we're looking at in Japan, notably the ones under the GX plan of METI. There need to be, if we're not having arguments about how to get there, then we are not doing our work. We need to be also, I need to stress, preparing for the impacts of climate change. So while the focus today is transition emissions, I just want to put a little marker for your books. 1.5 degrees warming will be achieved, is a terrible word, but achieved in the next couple of years, according to the World Meteorological Organization. And we need to prepare for significant climate impacts. Typhoons are already getting stronger in Japan. They're going to get much stronger, but it's not just typhoons, it's floods, it's heat, and it's all the social and economic and business interruption impacts of those. Japan is a leader in resilience work because of its long history of dealing with catastrophes. It has much to teach the world in this area. There's a transition to resilience we need to bring into these events in the future. But in the meantime, getting emissions down. So Climate Bonds works globally on green bonds, on climate bonds, and on transition plans. And we're working with corporations and with governments around the world on that topic. That's essentially what I do. But you know, to be honest, Yamaga-san, what I'm really wanting to do is to say how exciting it is to be on this panel with JL and with Manulife and with you, because just this in itself is an indication of the extent to which you have travelled in the last few years in starting to grapple with these incredible issues that we have to tackle.
So thanks, Sean. So now let's focus on the topic is the transition plans. So Sean, last year CBI released the guidance to assess transition plans. I believe this guidance is well designed to provide a complementary and introductory guide to help stakeholders understand the basic markers of a credible transition plan. So CBI also have published transition-related principles, hallmarks, and certifications since 2020. So how does CBI view transition plans? How has global discussion been regarding this field over the past few years? Sean, please.
So as you will be aware, the discussion about disclosure, TCFD initially, and then the idea of transition plans to be disclosed has advanced enormously in the last 5 years. In Europe, transition plans are becoming mandatory for listed corporations, in the UK as well. In many other markets, they're being actively promoted. In the US, under the Democratic administration, we've seen a lot of pressure on government, on corporations to do it. I don't think that agenda will go much further until we see the outcome of the November election. But in many jurisdictions, I mean, even the Philippines has made the disclosure, or rather the publishing of transition plans by corporations mandatory going forward. That's one movement. But what is a transition plan? So in the guidance we've put out, and we've been speaking to regulators around the world about this as well, it's very clear that first, that there are 3 key issues. First, we need a transition plan to be in line with the science. And that means, if you read the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports, what a 1.5 trajectory for the planet is, 1.5 degrees Celsius warming. There's still a lot of work to be done to interpret exactly what that means on one side, and there's a lot of work to be done to figure out how to do it in different industries like cement or basic chemicals or like. But that's the principle, which essentially means in line with the science. And one has to demonstrate, and a corporation needs to demonstrate how the transition plans are in line with the science. I want to stress that when we say transition plans, I prefer to call them transition opportunity plans, because there are we need all our companies to be profitable, to pay our pensions and our insurance policies later on. Otherwise, we won't be able to make this sustainable. So this needs to be certainly an emissions reductions plan, but a plan which shows how the corporation will be able to be profitable going forward as part of that. It's a business plan with a new factor involved in it. You know, we need to be conscious in that business planning of the resilience measures I talked about earlier. You know, for some corporations, this will be material. If you're a coastal property owner in Japan, this is going to become a significant issue of increased storm surges going forward, etc. But also the global economy is changing thanks to the strong policy action by the US, Europe, China, and of course now Japan. The economy is changing, electric vehicles are booming, solar is becoming cheap and so on. The corporations need to be conscious about how they can have a plan that will take advantage of the new business opportunities appearing as a result of a global change. Transition isn't just dealing with compliance, is what I'm trying to say. Transition is about taking advantage of the world that we're going into. The second point, which we say is quite important, is, of course, you need to talk about technological viability. What we can't do is have transition plans predicated on possible future technological developments. We have seen those. There are some transition plans where nothing much happens until 2040, and then suddenly the company gets to net zero between 2040 and 2050 very quickly as a result of new technological developments that are as yet uncertain. That's not a practical transition plan. We need a viable strategy. In JL's case, we have a difficult but very viable strategy underpinning their plan, which is sustainable aviation fuels. These have been proven, they're doable, but we have a lot of work to do to scale them up and make them price competitive with kerosene. At least we've got very clear objectives there, but we know it works. So that's an example of technological viability. Of course, we need to see an action plan, not promises, but what does a capital investment plan look like? How are we going to get there? You know, a plan can't be just targets. A plan needs to be evidence so Manulife can say, you know what, they really do have a capital investment plan, and more to the point, I can see investments that we can make to support that, and so on. They're the three key principles. I will just add two more caveats. The first is you can't have a transition plan that involves you buying offsets. Now, offsets have a role. As we reduce our emissions, to take JEL's emissions reduction trajectory, then we're certainly very supportive of buying carbon credits while emissions are being reduced for the portion that you can't reduce in the short term. And that will be really important for forest protection and increase in tropical nations and various other carbon protection and carbon removal measures that we need to support globally. But what we need to steer away from is buying offsets while we continue to emit without necessarily taking action, which we have seen happening in the corporate world in Europe in places. So the careful approach to carbon credits and offsets is an important part of what we have to do. The second point is monitoring and reporting. If you're an investor, that you're investing in a corporation with a transition plan, you want to see progress. This is perfectly reasonable, and as JEL has been doing, and that becomes a norm for corporations everywhere. My last point, unrelated to what calls a transition plan, is that we need to understand that the challenge of reducing emissions at the speed at which we need to reduce them is such that it is very difficult for an individual corporation alone to make this transition speedily enough, effectively enough. We've got to work together, and we need the government, the public sector, to help enable these transitions. This is only going to happen with a close working relationship with government and corporations and investors. By working together, we can climb mountains. If we work alone, we will only be climbing hills.
So, Sean, thank you for the detailed explanation for the global trend about the transition plans over the past few years. I really understand well the trend over the past years. Thank you. So next, let's turn to more details on this discussion of the transition plans. So Ogawa-san, JEL has been very innovative and have been developing detailed disclosures and issuing transition bonds. So could you give us an overview of the JEL's transition plan, please?
Thank you, Yamaga-san. Could you show the slide again, please? Yes. So this is a roadmap to net zero emission, and there are three pillars. As you can see, three colors on the roadmap, which are the upgrading to fuel-efficient aircraft, which is shown in blue here, and reduction in daily operation, which is in yellow color, and third is use of SAF in green color. We internally call this roadmap as a trumpet, in Japanese, rappa, and then from this shape. We expect the 50% of reduction from upgrading to fuel-efficient aircraft, and 5% by reduction in daily operation, and rest by the use of SAF. As for the aircraft, it is expected that the hydrogen or electricity aircrafts will be available sometime around 2035 to 2040, but only for gradually from the small aircraft, which operate on short haul, as such aircrafts will not have the ability to operate for long distance. In order to operate for long distance, and to transport a number of people, at the time with the wide-body aircraft, we need SAF even in 2050. I would also like to add that SAF is very effective and sustainable solution as it is identical in the composition to kerosene, which is the conventional fuel. This means that we do not need to additional investment to make change any part of the aircraft and also to the infrastructure in order to use SAF. While we try to make the best use of the reduction in daily operation, which can be done through our own efforts, it is essential for JAL to implement upgrading to fuel-efficient aircraft and use of SAF, although this will have the greatest financial impact over the medium and long term, maintaining the balance between income and expenditures. The state-of-the-art equipment with high fuel efficiencies is quite expensive, but we will utilize transition bonds in planned manner in order to steadily continue the renewal of such equipment. The issue of SAF, as Sean mentioned, there isn't enough SAF in place at the moment. And the price is 2 to 5 times more expensive compared to the conventional fuel. So we try to procure with as reasonable price as possible. For example, good example is that JAL is a member of One World Alliance, and we as Alliance jointly procure SAF with volume incentive. So that's all from me at the moment. Thank you.
So thank you, thank you, Ogawa-san. So I now have a good understanding of the JAL's transition plan from the perspective of the 3 pillars on transition bonds. So Oshita-san, from the financial institutions perspective, how do you view transition plans such as JAL's? What are key points that financial institutions usually look for in a transition plan?
Yeah, thank you for Yamada-san. The outline was shared by the Sean, so a little bit space that I add the comments. But generally speaking, I understand that the transition plan is a high resolution of all or part of the company's transition strategy. And I do believe the resolution can be increased by the following factors, like the identifying risk and opportunity, and in other words, the robust scenario analysis, the measures to address the identifying risk and opportunities, and a clear transition pathway and alternative plans like the Plan B and Plan C, and integrating the climate risk management into corporate level risk management, and investment plans based on the climate strategy. That's a general comment. And move to our perspective on the JAL's transition plan. And the JAL's transition plan was very impressive from the investor's perspective. There are 3 pillars from the investor perspective. The first one is a link between the climate change response and the business. The second is a clear target. And lastly, the engagement. In terms of the connection to business, the fact that the 5 horses, the analysis is used as the basis for scenario analysis that forms the premise of the climate strategy. And the fact that the timing of risks and opportunities correspond to business strategy can be cited. In the scenario analysis, JAL is analyzing the 2-degree and 4-degree scenario, and as new entrants, it is citing the threats of the entrants using the electric aircraft and model shift as a threat of alternative products. In terms of the time periods covered by the risks and opportunity, for example, the short term, corresponds to the period covered by the current medium-term management plan. And the medium-term corresponds to the JAL Vision 2030. I think those kind of the effort were very beneficial for investors to be able to understand the link to the business through the scenario analysis. And next, turn to the career targets. Could you please share the JAL's presentation? Yeah, as an investor, I would like to see all companies disclose their transition pathways as JAL has done, this wrapper figure. I have heard that this is a result of the collaboration between industry and individual airlines. There are two main advantages to this disclosure. The first, the fact that there is a trajectory for the entire period up to 2050, when net zero will be reached, means the pathway can be considered in relation to the carbon budget. And secondly, because there is a trajectory and the contribution of each measure is clear, it is very easy to monitor the progress of each measure. In addition, this is very comparable to peers. I feel that the JAL's transition strategy is easy for stakeholders to monitor, and that is feasible, is easy to evaluate. It is truly credible. Finally, there is an engagement. As you fully aware of, the aviation industry's emissions are mainly from the scope 1, the emissions from the aircraft. From this perspective, the things that the airline that do not produce aircraft and aviation fuel can do on their own are limited. As a result, engagement is crucial for airline to achieve net zero. This engagement is not really stated in the original TCFD framework, but we think it was a really important part of the transition plan. JAL's transition plan includes the item called JAL Group Future Efforts to promote domestic sustainable aviation fuel. This initiative is based on collaboration and the aligning with the public and the private sectors. The core of this initiative is Act for Sky. This is a voluntary organization that is working across Japan to commercialize and promote the use of domestic SAF. The two major domestic airlines, long-term rivals, JAL and ANA, are participating in this initiative. I think this is pretty innovative, and it shows that the Japan and the Japanese airlines, including JAL, are working together to achieve net zero. I think this is a very good case study that has developed from engagement to initiative. That's it. Thank you.
So thank you, Yoshida-san. So financial institutions seem to be analyzing companies' transition plans for a variety of perspectives and conducting engagement. I was also very impressed by the cooperation between JAL and ANA to work on SAF in order to achieve net zero. So let me then turn back to Ogawa-san. What were the difficulties or challenges when developing and communicating this transition plan?
Okay, thank you, Yamaga-san. Upon planning, while solutions for emission reductions are limited in aviation as hard-to-abate sectors, the companies should set its target as aggressive as possible and consider concrete measures to realize the plan and promote the measures. In terms of communication, it is difficult to communicate since while updating the company's business plan, as the internal factor, the external factors such as changes in applicable regulations, such as ICAO's CORSIA, carbon offsetting and reduction scheme for international aviation, which is a global market-based measure to reduce emissions from international aviation, and business assumptions such as IATA's sectoral growth factor, which affect estimating the size of CORSIA offsetting, etc., may cause the financial impact to fluctuate significantly, and the transition plan should be presented quantitatively and with a certain degree of probability. However, I'd like to add that by setting ambitious target, highlighting the issues we face in achieving the target, there are some people or companies who offer or hint the solution. In other words, we could have collaborators to solve the issue, and I'm sure that we will have such collaborators from now on too. From that point, I would like to emphasize that disclosing the transition plan is efficient, especially for the industries like us who cannot have solution on our own. Thank you.
So thank you, Ogawa-san. I realize that there are so many external factors in the aviation sector, it is difficult to communicate the transition plan. So next, the TCFD consortium released the guidance on the development of transition plans. So Oshida-san, I hear you were one of the central people in its development of the guidance. So what do you think are the strengths of this guidance? Can it answer to the challenges that Ogawa-san mentioned?
Yes, I'm wondering if the center of the person is in its development, but yeah, I try best to answer to your question. And in case of the JAL, they have already had a great transition plan. So Ogawa-san probably she had got this guidance earlier. And I feel that the guidance is powerful resource for company that want to or improve their transition plan in the future. But before I go into the strengths of the guidance, I'd like to briefly touch on the meaning of the transition plan for investors. The guidance describes transition plan as decision useful information that provides the clearest possible picture of how a company can balance value creation with transition to a low carbon, decarbonized society. I feel that for investors, having a transition plan in place improved their understanding of the company's approach to climate change and make it easier to assess investment and financing. The investors also make investment and financing decisions under various regulations and restrictions. So I feel that having a solid transition plan will help investors to better explain their investment decisions. And now let's turn to the guidance. I do believe that this guidance has very practical from the following these three perspectives. The first, it improves understanding of the transition plan. Second, it ensures interoperability. And third, lastly, it includes many case studies. The first, it improves understanding of the transition plan. At present, there are a number of initiatives that have developed transition plan frameworks, including the CBI. And I think the outline of those frameworks are not very different. But there are some differences. I think the TCFD transition plan guidance is a good way to understand the transition plan at the first glance, because it compactly summarized the relationship between the frameworks formulated by the initiatives. It is my personal opinion that by adding certain elements to the TCFD, it can function sufficiently as a transition plan. I think that by adding the funding plans and engagement to strategy and culture to the governance, it can be adopted almost all transition plan frameworks. And next one is the interoperability. The guidance refers to the GX League and the transition finance principles. The transition finance principles have been created in line with ICMA Transition Handbook. And as I mentioned earlier, and the other panelists mentioned the relationship between the transition plan and the transition finance. For investor, from the investor's perspective, analyzing the transition plan is the same as the analyzing the transition finance. Being able to confirm consistency with existing initiative will reduce the psychological burden on the issuers of having to do something new again and again. And I think it will help to avoid TCFD or climate-related disclosure fatigue among their issuers. Finally, I'm touching on to the case study. There are many case studies in the guidance. Page 27 to 57 of the guidance case studies. There are 60 pages in total, so you can see how substantial the case studies are. When engaging with issuers, we often heard that they wanted to know about the best practice prepared by their companies rather than their investors' recommendation. In that sense, each case study describes what, in the guideline, each case study describes what investors are looking for. So for issuers, it is easy to understand the selling point of each disclosure. I think that this will greatly help issuers in formulating the transition plans. The case studies are mainly about Japanese companies, but non-Japanese companies like the ArcelorMittal are also included. So I do believe the contents can be used globally.
So, thanks, Osha-san. So Osha-san mentioned the transition plans guidance has many good case studies, some of which include avoided emissions as an evaluation metrics of their transition plans. As you may know, the G funds and the PCAT exemplify the avoided emissions as an assessment metric of transition finance and the financial institutions' portfolio, especially in terms of climate solutions and renewable energy. So actually, earlier this month, MIS4, my company, published a comprehensive avoided emissions focus report. So to this, have you already read the MIS4's avoided emissions report? No? So if not yet, please access to MIS4's corporate website to check it out. Currently, it is only available in Japanese. Sorry about that. But we plan to release an English version within 1 or 2 months. So as we still have some time left for this session, so I'd like to ask one more question about the engagement. So Oshida-san have you had any positive experiences that the companies develop or actively consider transition plans as a result of your engagement with them?
Thank you, Yamada-san. I do believe as I mentioned, the engagement is center of the improving the transition plan and or other ESG disclosures. Let me share the one example of the dialogue regarding the transition plan. This is a case of the dialogue with the Chugoku Electric Power Company, one of the Japan's major electric power companies. While you know that there are still issues and work to be done, the company has made a significant progress in disclosure related to its transition plan. Over the past several years, we as bond investors have struggled to engage in dialogue with the company. As generally speaking, the companies are very much focusing on the engagement with stakeholders, not bondholders. But you know that things has changed drastically when the company hold a debt IR meeting for the transition finance in 2023. That's the power of the transition finance. Since then, we had, say, the 4 to 5 sustainability-related dialogue, including the transition plan and biodiversity over the next 6 months. As a result, the company's 2024 integrated report is largely investor-friendly in its contents compared to the 2023 and earlier. For example, they don't have any pathway towards the 2050, but they have the pathway in the report 2024. Based on this experience, we feel that this is a result of the company's managers and their staffs, sincerely listening to the opinions of many lenders and investors, including ours. We fully understand the urgency of addressing the climate change, but we also feel that it is important to build up the dialogue and the outcome based on the dialogue that comes to it one by one.
So, Osha-san, thank you for sharing the good, excellent experience of the engagement with the companies. So, well then, in order to wrap up, let's discuss the future perspective of the transition plans and the climate-related disclosures. So, from each of your perspective, how can disclosure develop to further facilitate the flow of finance to decarbonization, especially in the context of hard-to-abate sectors? So, Osha-san, please.
Yeah, the case study was stated regarding the Chugoku Electric Power Company. But I feel that the most important thing is to create an ecosystem that improves the disclosure. By constantly providing the feedback based around the stakeholders' engagement, I feel that there is a need take further action than at present, with issuers and investors at the center to improve the disclosure, attract investment, identifying disclosure issues, and lobby regulatory authorities and SPO providers. I feel that the virtuous cycle of disclosure and investment can be created by ensuring the ecosystem functions as well. Why the ecosystem? I sometimes heard that the company, the engagement seems to be the one direction. the investor asks their company regarding their voting rights or list. That's it. So, but that's not create the value of the engagement. So I do believe that both direction, the engagement will be the benefit for investors and issuers. In that sense, I would like to encourage issuers to listen to the thoughts of investors at engagement meeting if they have any issues or concerns about disclosure. And I also strongly feel that we, investors, also need to make a daily effort to become a solution provider for the issuers. That's it from me.
Thank you, Yoshida-san. The next, Okada-san, so from the company or the issuer side, so please.
Thank you, Yamaga-san. So from our point of view, disclosure is very important and helpful. However, it is difficult to follow all the various rules and frameworks while the disclosure mechanism in place. We are a company in Japan, and however, we operate various countries and need to follow those regulations of each country to avoid the risk that we would be seized operation for not complying to them. I think same applies to any industry who do the business around the world. So we are preparing for the following the SSBJ in Japan soon, and at the same time we need to comply the regulation in EU such as CSRD or CSDDD. So I think the recipients of the information are also must be confused. So therefore, transition plans and climate-related disclosures would develop when the rules are organized or unified and accessible and understandable to everyone. As for our transition plan, 3 years passed since we released it. The environment surrounding us is changing from various aspects. The plan should be considered in 3 to 5 years, which is medium term, but it is also important that such plans need to be revised if any irregularity occur, or should there be any discrepancy with the plan, if that is significant to communicate the correct information to the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Ogawa-san. So Sean, sorry for keeping you wait for a long time. So could you share your perspective about the future prospects of the transition plans?
Look, my comments are of a more general nature. You've heard some great comments from Yoshida-san, from Ogawa-san. The idea of transition plans is going global. We have a movement, as I said, in Europe and in other countries like Philippines, they're becoming mandatory, etc. But I think from investors' perspective, they're becoming necessary because of anxiety about the future. The future is changing. There is no doubt that emissions will reduce. The question is how, where, who's going to be a winner, who's going to be a loser. There is no doubt the climate impacts, there's no doubt the global economy is changing. So at the very minimum, investors are looking for confidence in the companies they invest in, that they're making the changes necessary to be able to prosper in this new world. So that's a minimum requirement for transition planning. In terms of emissions reductions, we need to have confidence that the plans of companies like JL are in line with the science, in line with what's required. And as I'm not saying anything about JL's plan because it's great what they've done, but we need some third-party references here. We're working with Transition Pathways Initiatives, the Science Based Targets Initiative, and other organisations. I'm on the International Energy Agency's Finance Advisory Board, for example, on how to bring together all the bodies in the world working on guidance to provide clarity and coherence for companies like JL in terms of references for what are the right kinds of transition trajectories we've got to achieve. In other words, guidance is coming through. Now, JL's done a great job, but another company like JFE or someone may not have done that work, and so therefore the international references are useful. We're also working, by the way, on interoperability of guidance. So we're working with the PRI and the Unit Finance Initiative next year under the umbrella of the G20, and I'll be at the launch of this in Baku for the G20 work. There'll be an interoperability project between guidance around the world, taxonomies and other forms of guidance. In other words, we're sort of getting the guidance together to make it easier for corporates and for investors to figure out what to do and what's the right thing to do and the necessary ambition. But the opportunity I want to leave you with is not so much corporate. It goes back to the GX plan, and it's national. What we need to do globally to achieve our UNFCCC goals, our climate goals, is to transform these ideas of national climate change plans, NDCs as they're called in the jargon, into transition plans, national transition plans, investment plans. At the next COP in Belém, next year I should say, there'll be the beginning of this for a couple of countries presenting this. In the COP after, at Australia, we're expecting that to be a COP primarily of national transition investment plans, pipelines of investments. And of course, Japan is well advanced. I'm hoping Japan will be able to play a leadership role in showing other countries what to do with an exemplary GX 2040 plan, which is an investment plan, which is a pipeline, which looks, or rather demonstrates for Ishida-san and all the investors he represents, the kinds of investments that are coming through the system, the national plans, and of course, the corporate plans that are under the umbrella of that national plan, to bring it all together. We, in human society, in the economy around the world, need to develop greater guidance and greater confidence that we're making the change and enthusiasm about it. And the way to do that is to map out the detail, not so much targets, but proper investment plans going forward. So I think that's a big opportunity coming up. There are a number of countries interested in this. As I said, Japan is well advanced and could play a really important global leadership role in showing how to construct a plan to transform an economy to be fit for the future. Transition plans are going national as well as corporate.
So thank you, Sean. So thank you all for the active discussion. So the institutionalization and the standardization of climate-related disclosures has progressed, and the number of the companies addressing them has increased rapidly. So climate-related disclosures has the effect of advancing efforts towards net zero transition in the real economy. As a result, the companies are expected to develop and communicate their own transition strategies that will convince stakeholders of their business growth and sustainability. At the same time, financial institutions need to engage fully with their clients to understand their situations and views up to 2050. So it is extremely important for companies to develop and implement effective transition strategies and transition plans consistent with the Paris Agreement, and to disclose the international standardized climate-related information. So in Japan, the various discussions are being held within the TCFD consortium, including the development and the disclosures of the transition plans. I hope this discussion will develop not only in Japan, but also globally. So at the end, please give the panelists a round of applause. So now I'd like to close this panel discussion. Thank you all for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yamaga and the panelists. Thank you very much. Lastly, Mr. Shigetake Naoki, COO of GX Acceleration Agency, will give a closing remark. Mr. Shigetake, please.
Thank you for the introduction. My name is Naoki Shigetake, COO of GX Acceleration Agency, in short GXA. For those who do not know us, we GXA launched this July 1st with a mission of driving green transformation. Our role is to provide financial support to cover GX-related risks which the private sector cannot bear. On behalf of METI and the co-sponsors, I extend my sincere thanks for all speakers, panelists, and participants of today's GGX Finance Summit. Your dedication and insights have been crucial in shaping today's discussions. The underlying message that emerged from today's summit was the notion of phase shift in the green transformation. Let me briefly highlight some key takeaways from each session. Session 1, expanding the GX market. While discussions around supply side had focused, this session emphasized we should also shift our focus to demand side as well. Ultimately, someone should bear the cost of GX. So creating GX market is essential to closing the GX loop. The visualization of emission reduction by reduced emissions of product is a critical first step as reduction really matters. The discussion triggered us to think about the importance of more focused approaches to materialize GX value segment by segment, step by step, for those who can afford and for early adopters of green value. And supportive government policies are essential to this process. Session 2, creating a GX startup ecosystem. This session highlighted, while many startups are facing scale-up challenges, it signals great potential for innovative solutions in GX space. The discussion centered how to help these startups overcome so-called death valley stage, where funding and resources are limited. The role of industries, financial sectors, and government has to shift from just nurturing the seeds to creating new ecosystems to provide sufficient funding and to introduce mandates and subsidies to create sufficient demands, including public procurement. Session 3, future prospect of transition finance. This session explored how transition finance has entered a new phase of global expansion and discussed its challenges. Eventually, it's all about transition. The concept of one goal, various paths needs to be realized with discipline. For example, the best practices of funding the transition in hard-to-abate sectors can be globally shared and disseminated to showcase and improve transition finance. Session 4, formulating transition plans. Disclosure has been intensely discussed here since 2019. Ito-sensei reviewed the progress of TCFD consortium and its critical role in GX. Thanks to all the effort by those who are involved in disclosure and TCFD discussions in this event and others, we have successfully progressed to the next phase, that is transition plans, or I should say transition opportunity plans. As demonstrated in JAL example, the transition plan is a strategy which guides investment decisions of both industries and financial sectors. Transition plans are vital for making GX a reality. TCFD consortium, as mentioned, developed the guidance for transition plans. On this occasion, I am honored to announce that the GX Acceleration Agency, GGXA, is going to succeed its operation in near future. In conclusion, as we reflect phase shift of green transformation in each session, it becomes clear that this summit marks the start of a new era for GGX. The transition finance started. The green transformation has also begun. I am excited to see how we will advance by 2025. We GXA, GX Acceleration Agency, are just a newborn organization. We have been inspired by everyone here's enthusiasm, commitment, and dedication. My resolution at the end of this summit is we will do our best to accelerate green transformation. Thank you once again to everyone involved, and I look forward to seeing you at the next GGX Summit in 2025. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shigetake.